What's happening, everybody? This is Hugo Mendez, and welcome to episode 1 of the Dig Deep Conversations. On this very first episode, I talked with professional ultra runner and friend Joshua Stevens. Joshua's background is fascinating, not only because he's a pretty competitive runner, but also because he spent several years with the U.S. Army and had multiple deployments to the Middle East. After coming back to the U.S., he struggled with opiate medication addiction. He found in running not only a way to cope with that, but also overcome those struggles. We talked about his role as an ambassador for an organization called the Heron Project, a non-for-profit that assists individuals and families struggling with addiction. We also talked about this crazy challenge that he recently did to raise awareness for opiate medication addiction. He ran 24 hours on a treadmill. Yes, that is pretty crazy. I hope that you like this first episode. And here's my conversation with Joshua Stevens.
All right, I'm so excited. First edition of the Dig Deep Conversations. I'm really pumped to introduce you to my good friend, Joshua Stevens. Hey, man.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. So we're here at the Boulder Running Company. Why? Because we are not only friends, but also co-workers here. Joshua is the master guru in all things trail and ultra running shoes and gear. So whenever you're in town, just be sure to stop by and visit him. Look at this. I came out with my list of things, so we're gonna kick this off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You grew up, you have a really, really strong background, impressive background in the Army as well. And how did you get into trail and ultra running?
Sure. Well, I grew up in New England, on the coast of Maine, predominantly, and that's where I did my schooling. And then in 1989, I first enlisted in the Army, and had done okay on some testing, so they thought that maybe I wasn't reaching my full potential as a private in the infantry, so I had the opportunity to attend the University of Maine for my undergraduate work, and was in the ROTC program, and continued being involved in sport. I wasn't historically a runner. I think I competed once in cross country in my freshman year in high school. I went over to soccer, but
nice. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was definitely never the fastest or strongest or biggest kid. I was pretty little.
Is that the reason why you like Diego Maradona?
Yeah, of course.
We both agree that Diego Armando Maradona is the greatest soccer player in the history of sports, of soccer, I guess. So.
The pride of Argentina.
Very, yeah. Anyway, awesome. Okay.
So through that process, I continued to be involved in sport, and I think it was an outlet for me to continue to push myself and to achieve and to try to do more than people expected of me. And then the Army was really another kind of extension of that. It was a great vehicle, which is a very, it's a very focused meritocracy where you can achieve whatever you want, so long as you're willing to put in the time and the effort. And so I really kind of enjoyed that environment. And I spent the next 24 years from 1989, but the next 20 years or so in
multiple deployments.
Sure, yeah, multiple global deployments throughout the 90s and the 2000s.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, I was reading more about your background. I mean, thank you very much for your service.
Oh, it was my honor. It was a privilege. So yeah, I was first wounded in combat operations in Iraq in 2005 as a result of improvised explosive device in a town called Beji, Iraq, in northern Salah ad-Din province. And that resulted in a break in my cervical spine and some ruptured discs, which was the first time I ever became exposed to opiate pain medication. And I like to think that up until that point, I'd led a pretty mindful life and hadn't, I'd never grown up really exposed to drugs or, excessive alcohol use. And that became a crutch initially to, mitigate the physical pain and to keep me actively in my profession. It's oftentimes, I like the comparison to working at the elite level in the United States Army as to professional athletes in terms of there's a robust infrastructure to keep you on the field.
Yeah.
So I had, well-meaning and well-qualified medical practitioners that would do everything within their power to keep you in the game. And this was at a very high operational tempo time globally with Iraq and Afghanistan, and we were deploying every year essentially. So to suffer a fairly catastrophic injury and really gave you just two choices. It's fairly binary. You can either choose to take yourself out and leave your teammates short, or do whatever it takes in order to continue to compete at that level. So that's how opiates found their way into my life. One of the areas that, that I didn't realize until much later was another insidious component of opiates is their physiological and chemical capacity to numb emotional pain. So as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan drug on, I was not acknowledging or treating post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms or root causes. I had suffered traumatic brain injury from multiple exposures to IED incidents, and of course I was continuing to numb the physical pain with very powerful prescription medications.
Right.
It ranged the gamut from fentanyl to Dilaudid to Percocet. This continued on, and I had my first cervical spinal surgery at Walter Reed in 2008, and then a second at Womack Army Medical Center at Fort Bragg in 2011. And at that point, I was 6 years into heavy use of prescription pain medication, and I was no longer just using it as prescribed. I had been abusing it for quite some time, and it is a unbelievably nefarious drug in the sense that you're allowed to. Addicts become tremendously adept liars, and they become very good at lying to themselves. And one of the dangers of opiates is, so long as there's a professional providing it to you, there's a rationale or justification in your mind that, I'm just doing what a professional has told me to do. That was a dark path. It becomes a completely isolating and obsessive lifestyle where the only concern that you wake with and go to bed with at night is, where am I going to get my next pain pill?
Right.
So that that path really only goes a couple of places, and it took a toll, significant toll on my family. It cost me a marriage. It cost me probably progressing further into the military had I not been so severely injured and just unable to cope with the demands of that kind of lifestyle with, again, untreated PTSD, marginally treated traumatic brain injury, and they've come a long ways. They didn't have, many of the methodologies of treatment and therapy that they have today. And as I became close to retirement, as that approached, I really had to come face to face with myself. And in my early 40s, as the tennis great Martina Navratilova says, what really choices do you have? You either compete or you quit. And I've never been a quitter. I've never been the fastest or the strongest or the biggest, but I've also never been a quitter. So the first step was to get clean. And when we talk a little bit further here in a moment about the Heron Project, one of the reasons that raising money for treatment and support for addiction is that I didn't feel that I had that. There was still a lot of misunderstanding and ignorance surrounding addiction, even within family circles and friend circles.
Of course, right.
It was still largely perceived as a moral failing rather than this disease. So I locked myself in a room for 7 days. And,
what?
Guest room.
Okay.
Yeah, and if anyone's familiar with getting clean from heroin, withdrawal is one of just the most horrific experiences. And I didn't have any of the medications that can help alleviate that. I believe there was a 96-hour period in which I didn't sleep. And I came out of that with a couple of basic understandings. One is I never want to relapse because I never want to go through that again. But moreover, there's got to be a better way for people who have unwittingly fallen into this trap to gain not only the medical support and resources, but family support and love and understanding to climb out of that hole. It's pretty tough to get out.
That's pretty hardcore.
Recovering from surgeries and addiction left me hanging around a lot. Watched a lot of TV. Read a lot of books. Had quite a bit of time for reflection. But I'd always had in the back of my mind this fear that once I was done with the Army, there would be this massive void in my life. I think I've always tried to pursue activities, adventures, and endeavors that challenge me both mentally and physically. I'd been a pretty prolific diver for a number of years, had gotten into cave diving and exploration and mapping and open ocean, deep open ocean wreck diving. Of course, I'd had the Army, having been a Ranger and served in a number of Army Special Operations Forces units in my career. And by complete chance, I watched the movie Unbreakable.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah.
Really? That's what made you think of...
It is, and it comes full circle. It's a great...
So for the people who don't know about the movie, sorry man, Unbreakable is this documentary that it's about the Western States 100. It follows 4 ultra runners, and it's basically their story, the days before and during the race and after the race. Is awesome. It's one of my favorite movies.
I really interestingly had a chance to catch up with Tony Krupicka at the Ultimate Direction Christmas party last week. And I had shared with him that I was 44, wasn't sure what I was going to do with the next chapter of my life. I watched that movie And I told him, I said, you inspired me to move into this career, this profession. And he laughed. He said, well, you must have been disappointed at the end of the movie.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, absolutely
awesome.
not.
So Tony Krupicka, Anton Krupicka, is a crazy, badass ultra runner. He lives in Boulder, Colorado, and he was one of the main characters in this documentary.
Yeah, just an extraordinary mountain endurance athlete and two-time Leadville champion. So, I watched that movie, and I probably I've never really been accused of moderation or being reasonable. And I thought, man, I'd like to do that. I had no idea if I'd physically be able to do it, or if I was too old or not. And I ran my first ultra distance on my 44th birthday when I was living and training in Asheville, North Carolina, with a local runner there, and ran the Art Loeb Trail, which is about a 50K distance trail with a ton of gain, and it's pretty challenging.
So when do you start running? Actually,
Sure. Well, I've always run.
I mean, ultra. Like you were saying, is that like 4 years ago?
So 2017. I mean, really, only 3 years ago.
Okay, so this is crazy. This guy has won one of the most competitive, really. 100Ks here in the state of Colorado. It's called the Bear Chase. So there's different distances. The guy won it last year. So he's been running for only 3 years, and he's already winning stuff. And then I think you finished top 5 in the Rocky Raccoon 15-miler.
Sure did.
Dude, that's just insane. I just need to get some advice from him how to win stuff. Because I did the Bear Chase 50K this year, and it took me 7 hours. So anyway. That's awesome.
It's about being out there. It's about being out there, man. And
that's
one of the great things about what you're doing with Dig Deep, and one of the things I love about Colorado and Coloradans and the athletes out here. No matter how fast you are or good you are, all you got to do is just turn around, and there's someone faster or better or stronger. In this town. I mean, it's so motivational.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, for real. Yeah, I remember when I first moved here, went up on this hilly ride, and then I was just doing my thing, feeling like Lance Armstrong, and then there's this 75-year-old guy just passed me by, just like nothing. So it was crazy. How did you get involved with the Heron Project?
Yeah, so I really had been treating portions of my life in a compartmentalized way. It was pretty linear. There was running, there was recovery, there were my kids. I mean, and I essentially, I think as a byproduct of how you have to be in the military, particularly, in combat situations, you have to be able to seal off certain feelings and emotions, not in a sense of being an automaton. You never lose your morality or your ethical compass, but you have to be able to be laser focused on certain tasks. In 2000, it would have been 16, I guess. Yeah, I was at the American Trail Runner Association conference in Estes Park, and I had met David Clark briefly on a book tour by.
And who's David? Clark?
David Clark. Yeah, David is an amazing American inspirational story. He had written the book Out There. David was a former 320-pound alcoholic and drug addict who had essentially lost a multi-million-dollar business, and through, I wouldn't say predominantly because there's never one thing, but through endurance athletics, he reinvented himself. And he's just an amazing character. The first guy that had kind of led me to meeting David Clark is Charlie Engel.
Yeah.
And Charlie is a good friend of mine and has been a great mentor and inspiration to me.
Yeah, he's great. I learned about Charlie. The first time I learned about Charlie is when I watched the Running Through His Hair.
Yeah.
I watched the movie. I have that movie on DVD. I watched it so many times.
You know, to speak of, you know, what Charlie did for me, just a quick anecdote was the first real, like, national ultra that I ran was the Badwater Cape Fear 50 miler on the East Coast. And that's where I met the great Pete Kostelnick, who broke the Transcon record last year and is a two-time Badwater champion, course record holder. So it's a 50-mile race that's part of the Badwater series, and it's the East Coast portion of the series. So 50-miler, 38, 39 of it's on the beach.
My God.
Which is a challenge. And,
Okay.
So I had, again, completely inexperienced, maybe the third ultra I'd ever run.
Yeah.
And had done pretty well. Was in fourth place up to about 46 miles, and at mile 46. The challenge with being on the beach was you could never get away from anybody.
Yeah.
No matter how well you were running, you could always see who was in front of you, and the person behind you could always see you.
Oh man, that's gotta be pretty mental.
It was a grind. And this great runner from the East Coast named Frank Gonzalez, who was a very experienced and very quality runner, I think probably knew how much of a novice I was. Dropped me at mile 46 like I was standing still and broke my will. Fast forward a little bit. The last 4 miles were pretty brutal, and I got passed by another guy, but with about a mile and a half left, Charlie Engel caught up with me. And maybe it was about a mile to go at this point, and I was gassed. I was definitely deep back inside the pain cave at that point. And
did you always the whole idea of like going the distance and physical suffering and those things that we all like?
Right.
We all love it, right?
No, I did, and just a point about Charlie's character, he caught up with me, and I didn't know what he had left. He didn't know what I had left, but he looked over me. Never met me before. I mean, the guy didn't know me from anywhere. I'm nobody, and he said, "Why don't we run this thing in together?" And I was like, "Well, that's amazing, amazing sportsmanship and an amazing gesture." So we finished. I always tease them. They gave him 6th and me 7th, and we crossed the same time. But that's where I met Charlie. So through that, fast forward to being out here, David Clark and Charlie had done. They participated in the Icebreaker run. So the team run across the U.S. to raise awareness for mental health treatment. Okay. And I met David and at a book tour for Charlie and out in Denver. A few months later, I was at the Ultra conference in Estes. David had a table set up with his book out there, which is an amazing read. And we talked a little bit about what I was doing with my story, or more to the point, what I wasn't doing, and how it wasn't necessarily incumbent of me, but perhaps it was a little bit selfish on my part for not using trail running, which I was getting some notice for and doing pretty well with, using that as a vehicle to share my story about addiction and really move the ball forward with getting people treatment and support.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I guess what you were saying, and I'm thinking for me too, is like trying to use what you're doing as part of something that's bigger than just yourself. I mean, I'll be honest, like when I first started Dig Deep, like I just was focused on selling stuff. And then like I realized little by little that, you know, people really love to be part of this community, be part of something that's bigger than themselves, and they get inspired by, you know, daily quotes that I post and things like that. And that got me thinking, okay, you know, this is something that I think is it's bigger than just, you know, trying to make money out of selling stuff.
Right.
So let's talk about digging deep in general. I guess one of the things that I get curious about, you know, people, you know, like you who run in a competitive way, is like, how do you prepare yourself to, you know, dig deep, you know, mentally and physically?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's almost more poignant during training. And as I get older, it's tough to sometimes find that motivation to do the kind of training that's required to perform well at a high level in endurance athletics. I can go back to my childhood and being a young man, and I think I've heard this about a number of athletes, is a fear of failing. I'm definitely terrified of the prospect of failing, you know, which you know, occurred at Leadville last year. I'm a competitor. I've always been competitive. I'm the oldest of 6 siblings, you know, brother, a sister, 2 stepbrothers, and a half sister, 4 of those being boys. So I want to win at everything.
Right.
So being propelled by fear of failing and letting people down, and this natural instinct to want to be the best that I can be, gets you a long ways. I would say that the best thing that's happened to me as a professional runner is the bolstering of support from nonprofits like the Heron Project and Something Better.
Right.
So running for something other than myself at, you know, now at age 47 has given me the motivation to get up and grind out the training and to stay consistent, and to get treatment, and to push forward.
It definitely makes it more meaningful, huh?
It absolutely does. I don't know that I would do these activities or continue to race, you know, for the foreseeable future without that kind of inspiration.
Awesome. So I'm just curious about the more technical, like a more tactical way, in the sense, like, when you have to dig deep, do you have like a playlist that you like to listen, you know, that you listen? Because I have one, my iPod, that's called, well, it used to be called Redline or something like that. So I only play it when I really needed to. Yeah. Or, I don't know, a podcast, or you have any mantra? Like, you're in the middle of that 100-mile race. Okay, you're in the, you know, hurt locker. You want to quit. Walk us through what's in your mind and how do you keep going?
Music, without a doubt. That's why I think maybe the Vermont 100 was one of the hardest things I've ever done, is because the Vermont 100, which was one of the 4 Grand Slam Ultra events, was my first 100-miler. It's still the traditional race where they have both the athletes as well as the horses. So if you go back to the early Western states.
No way, really?
So you're not allowed to use an iPod or music for safety reasons.
Yeah.
So being up in my head for 100 miles is not always the greatest place to be. Music, without a doubt. I know some people that listen to podcasts. I know some people that you know, use mantras or almost a meditative state in running. I'm definitely more visceral in terms of music. And it's, I wish I had something as clever as Redline. I have like playlists that are as creative as quiet, sort of quiet, not quiet, running, and running 2. I think those are my playlists.
Oh, the funny thing that you mentioned that Redline thing is that you have that robot voice of the iPod saying Redline. It's funny. Awesome. Yeah, I do the same thing. I think that I listen to music actually when as a treat, and by that I mean, like, for instance, I've done only one 50 mile. That was a Silver Rush in Leadville. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to run 50K, 30 miles, and my treat's going to be to start listening to music for the last 20. So it was like, okay, I was so looking forward to getting to that point because it definitely makes things easier. Because I used to like listen to music since the very beginning, and I like it, but for some reason, I don't know, in this kind of long distance things, you know, it makes it more special. Okay, one of the reasons why I wanted to kick off this series of conversations with Josh is because he, I mean, not only great guy, but he does crazy stuff. Like this weekend, okay, he's gonna run 24 hours on a treadmill here at the Boulder Running Company. He's not gonna run 24 hours just because he likes to run 24 hours on a treadmill. He's doing it to raise awareness for the Heron Project. So he's gonna encourage people to not only come and, you know, help him to finish it, but also to donate. So that's important. Tell us more about this project.
So last year, David Clark set up this 6 and 12 and 24-hour treadmill challenge for the Heron Project Ultra Team.
Okay.
So a number of athletes across the country participated in this. And I was going to try to do 24 hours. And I had no idea what I was getting into. I don't think I'd maybe been on a treadmill in 10 years or what have you. And I was like, oh, what the heck? You know, it'll be my first event for the Heron Project. Let me get on board. The night before the event, I went to the treadmill in my fitness center in my apartment complex, ran on it for 10 minutes to make sure it worked. And the next morning got up at 6 a.m. and I did it. I managed to get about 101 miles in 18 hours and 25 minutes.
Oh my God.
And then I was cooked. I was done.
Is that I saw one of your photos on Facebook where there's like Red Bull cans and Ensure Pedialyte, I think cans. Is that that's
that
awesome.
was it.
That's
so
awesome.
I had done no specific training for it. I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. It was it may have been the most challenging run I've ever done.
Of course.
So this year rolled around, and no one was saying anything about the event. Season 2 wasn't being talked about. And I contacted Pam Ricard, who is the director of THP Runs, and I said, I think, it always happens when you've had a great run, you're feeling good, you're like, I think I want to do it again this year. And so she quickly signed me up, and they threw their support behind it. And this year I wanted to elevate not only the level of performance, but elevate exposure to the Heron Project. So again, doing it here at BRC, having the support of Jack Rabbit, Boulder Running Company, my sponsors, Innovate, Steigen, and I do want to mention Dr. Wolf from Wolf Chiropractic and Functional Medicine, Levi Young from Levity Rolfing, Rally Sport, my strength coach Victoria Mitchell, and again all the folks that make it possible for me to do this. All really took this thing to a new level. We'll do it here in the shop. Shop will be open for 24 hours, and
I'm gonna be here taking some shots to be sure that he will finish his run. I'm gonna be like, dude, it's been only 90 miles.
Just 90 miles. Keep going. You just get started.
Do this. All right, final. Let's wrap this up. Okay, I'm gonna ask you 5 questions, Joshua.
Yes.
And please don't think much about it. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind. Okay.
All right.
Okay. 1. Do you have any life mantras?
Never quit.
Ooh, I like it. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. Don't think about it, okay? Favorite running shoe brand besides Innovate?
Solomon.
Okay. Number 1 bucket list race?
Badwater 135.
Ooh, really? I'm all about pain, and I loved it, but Badwater is one of those races that I'm like, what's the point? And I love physical pain.
Right.
It's Badwater and the Barclays. I'm like, but awesome. Holy crap. Name 1 person, dead, alive, celebrity, musician, whatever, doesn't matter, that you would love to take in a long run.
Ben Bridwell.
Okay, I'm
Band of Horses.
Okay. Okay, so musician.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know music, but you know more about this.
My second one is former British Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Oh, really? Specific reason why?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating man.
Awesome. Final question. You're going to desert island, and you know that you can only bring one song that you can listen for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
The Funeral, Band of Horses.
Okay. You see, he listens to all this crazy, awesome stuff that I don't know, and I'm like, I need to, because I love music. Anyway, final question. Favorite food or drink that you eat, when you're struggling in a 100-mile race?
Anything prepared by Kelly Balin Newland at Real Athlete Diets.
Oh, yeah?
And I also want to say anything that my amazing, beautiful, and brilliant girlfriend Rachel Nypaver prepares.
All right. I like that. Cool, man. This has been fun. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on,
Yeah,
man.
this is great. Thank you for listening and watching. Hey, this is the first time that I'm doing this, so please let me know. Any feedback, any questions, just let me know. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Wow, that was a very loud introduction. Well, we did this conversation on video. I was not using the right equipment. I'm still learning. So this is going to be a good learning process, and I really appreciate your patience. Thank you very much for listening to this very first edition of the Addictive Conversations, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.